Hi, all. I'm Professor Tina Good, and I've been getting a few questions about the writing response assignment that is coming due, that is asking you to do a close reading on either a passage from the Marquez story or from the Maxine Hong Kingston story. So I thought I'd go ahead and post this video to see if this helps you with the assignment and understand a little bit more specifically what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And the first thing we'll do is we will go ahead and look at the assignment that I have posted. Okay, and so this is the assignment. It gives you some instructions as to how to set up the assignment. And so first of all, you will see that I want it to be a minimum of 2 pages typed and double spaced. And I want you to choose just one of the passages to interpret from below, okay? That font should be double spaced Times New Roman 12. And just to remind you, Brightspace is only friendly with Microsoft Word documents or PDFs. So please be sure that you upload the proper document. Okay. And then what is really important before you get started is that you review the TIEIA video and PowerPoint that I posted some time ago that you've already taken a quiz on, and also the thesis statement video and attached link. You've already taken a quiz on that as well. But I think if you review those two videos, that will be helpful in addition to this one in helping you conduct this analysis. Okay, so remember, when you are interpreting something, you are telling your readers what it means and why it means what you say it means, okay? You are not just restating it in your own words. So make sure that that is happening in your interpretation. So let's back up just a little bit and go back to the introduction. Remember, your introduction, you should try to be attention-getting, have a hook to bring us into your introduction of what you're going to analyze. And the end of your introduction should have your thesis statement. And my tip to you is that you use something to the effect of the passage suggests, and then what you intend to prove with your whole writing response. Remember, your thesis statement is not proving something about the world. The only thing that you can do with the thesis statement is set out what you are going to prove about the story itself, okay, about the passage itself. So be very careful about that. Another thing that you want to stay away from is trying to prove that something is a symbol, right? You don't need to prove that. Just how does understanding that symbol, the way that you're discussing, help us understand that passage. But you're never setting out to prove in your thesis statement that something is a symbol. 2 points, common mistakes that people make. I've highlighted this because I want you to make sure that you have at least one of your body paragraphs as a TIEIA paragraph, right? You need to have 2 to 3, a minimum of 2 body paragraphs that is analyzing the passage below. One of them must follow the TIEIA format. This is really important, guys, because I will not consider your response for a grade unless it has a TIEIA paragraph within it. It does not have to be perfect. Your essay does not have to be perfect. This is a beginning writing response that I am looking for how you are practicing it. And as long as I see that you're practicing the TIEIA format, that you're practicing writing a thesis statement, that you're practicing the introduction, that you're practicing the conclusion, you're going to get a pretty good grade as long as you are not lapsing into plot summary, right? I'm not expecting perfection right now. I just want to see that you're practicing what we've been talking about in class. So for sure, you must have a TIEIA paragraph in your writing response, or I will not consider it for a grade. Okay, that is a minimum requirement for this paper. And finally, your final paragraph should now, now is when the time where you can extrapolate, okay, why does it matter? Why should it matter to us living in 2023? What you have interpreted. Why is it relevant to us? And that's something that you can put in your conclusion, in your final paragraph. Remember, your final paragraph is not where you restate your thesis statement and your argument. This is a very short assignment that is not necessary. So instead, what you need to be doing is stating why your interpretation is relevant to us. Okay, so I go on to say that you cannot use outside sources for your interpretation. You cannot, what that means is you cannot use ChatGPT, you cannot Google, you cannot use any source that would offer you an interpretation of this evidence. That deprives the entire assignment of its purpose, right? This is about you practicing, right, your interpretation. If you're looking at somebody else's, you're not getting your own skills. You're not developing your own skills. So don't do that. That will result in a 0, and you will not be able to revise it. And 50 points is a lot of points. So don't take that risk. Again, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm just looking for practice. So don't take that risk. That being said, if you are looking up a historical or cultural reference, I am going to consider that common knowledge. So if you want to, look up something about, feet being bound in the Maxine Hong Kingston, what is that cultural reference? If things that you don't understand, because let's face it, we can't all know everything about every single culture, but it's important you think to the story. You can look that up, right? You can Google that. And I'm going to consider that common knowledge, so it doesn't need to be cited. The only thing you can't do is Google an interpretation, right? Look up somebody else's interpretation. That you cannot do. Okay. So I hope that clears that up. So then I've given you 2 passages to choose from. One is from A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings. And the second is from No Name Woman. Okay. So this is how that I recommend that you begin with this writing response. The first thing I think you should do is just do a little interpretation of the passage itself before you even start on the introduction. Okay, so you might look at the Marquez passage, and you might look at it and say, okay, so the world had been sad since Tuesday. The sea and sky were a single ash gray thing, right? It goes on. And so, to talk about the stew of mud and rotten shellfish. And we might conclude from that, right, that where they are has been hit by some kind of storm and perhaps, a hurricane, right? And it happened on Tuesday, right? And it has caused this sadness. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. I hate to do this. I usually do this with stories that you are not analyzing, but I think it might be useful for this assignment, since it's your first one, to go ahead and have a specific example from, one of these 2 stories. Okay. So you'll notice that I began to interpret one particular line. And that's really what you need to do. These are very, very long passages. You cannot interpret this whole passage in 1 paragraph. You probably can't even interpret this whole passage in 2 pages. Okay, so what you need to do is really, really focus in on the language and the imagery that's being discussed in the passage, and break it out into separate paragraphs. So you'll notice that the first one that I began to look at is the line that says the world had been sad, right, since Tuesday. The world, I think about the world, I think about the sadness, I think about since Tuesday, right? And I'm going to just look at that one line for this paragraph. What do? Like, the world have been sad since Tuesday. And we say, well, okay, since Tuesday, that means that there must have been some kind of storm that happened. But what I find very interesting is that it's referring to their village, right, as the world, right? The world is very big. Their village is very small. And yet they're referring to their village as the world, right? Suggesting that their world is very small. Okay. So what does that mean? What does that suggest about this community? What does that suggest about this village? Okay. So I go back and after I've done my, sort of rough interpretation of specific lines, specific words, right? Then I go back and I write a topic sentence. Remember, the topic sentence is the sentence that you are going to prove in that one paragraph. It needs to be kept very, very focused. It should not ever be a sentence that is stating something that happened in the story. You are not using your opening sentence to give a plot point, right? As I said before, your interpretation, your analysis in literary analysis is always for an audience who has read the story that you're analyzing. You don't need to tell them what happened. They know what happened. You're going to highlight certain things in that story for them, but you don't need to give, a lot of context for it. Assume that they have read it. So my opening topic sentence would be something to the effect of, the opening line of the story suggests that the village has been overwhelmed by some sort of event that was beyond their control. Okay. So what do? Here's the introduction of the evidence right here. This phrase, the narrator states. Okay. This needs to be in there anytime you're bringing in information from an outside source. Some phrase that signals to the reader that you're bringing another voice in. And here is the evidence. The world had been sad since Tuesday. Notice how short that is. That is the only piece of evidence that I am going to interpret in this paragraph. Okay? And that's a good tip. Only do one piece of evidence per paragraph, because if you don't, you're likely either lapsing into plot summary or you're developing a second point, which needs a separate paragraph of its own. Okay? Notice that I put the MLA citation at the end of the quotation mark, and then I start with the interpretation. Interpretation. First, since the world has only been sad, sorry for that misspelling, sad since Tuesday, the reader knows that something happened just a few days earlier. A few days because it was Tuesday, right? It's still in that week. Earlier to cause the village to be sad. Something has happened, right? Something has happened. I'm interpreting Tuesday there. Something has happened. That their grief, therefore, is recent. It's a recent grief, right? Notice it's not saying that here. I'm interpreting it. If it happened on Tuesday, this is a very recent grief. And the event was so significant, it caused the whole village to be sad, right? The world, the sad. That the villagers refer to their village as the entire world suggests a degree of narcissism, right? And then I go in a little bit, which we would do in a separate paragraph to interpret, but I say the next few lines suggest that some sort of storm, possibly a hurricane, an act of God, has struck the town. And then I really developed this idea of the world. The world is an all-encompassing word, yet for the villagers, their immediate surroundings is their only world. They have a lack of perspective, all interpretation. None of this is stated in the evidence itself. I am interpreting it. They have a lack of perspective beyond their own situation. Okay, that's my interpretation of the evidence. All right, and so then how does my interpretation work towards proving the topic sentence. The sadness they feel, therefore, is overwhelming and causes them a sense of futility, right? There's nothing outside of them to give them any kind of hope. In other words, the disempowerment they feel as a result of this storm has caused them to feel like there's nothing they can do to make their lives better. So why try? Which goes back to proving, right, this topic sentence. Now, when you're ready, what I suggest after you've done this kind of interpretation is you go back and you write a working thesis statement at least. So you have a direction for your interpretation. So I go back and I've written here, destruction, my working thesis statement might be destruction of their world by forces beyond their control has caused the villagers to focus their efforts on their own survival rather than care and compassion for others. Okay, so by looking at this thesis statement, right, I'm going to have to prove 1, destruction of their world, 2, destruction of their world by forces beyond their control, 3, that this destruction has caused the villages to focus on their own survival, right, and finally, that this focus on their own survival has caused them to lack care and compassion for others. Okay, so that's at least 4 paragraphs, right, that it would take to prove this working thesis statement. I'm not asking you to have 4 paragraphs, but I just want you to see how that would work. You can't prove all of this in 1 paragraph. You're going to take it apart, right? It's kind of your roadmap for what do you have to prove this thesis statement. Okay. Some other notes that I want to call your attention to is in your introduction, no matter what literary analysis you're working on, you must always state the title of the text you are analyzing and the name of its author. For example, if you were doing this passage, you would want to let your readers know that you're interpreting this story called A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Again, because these are short stories, all of your titles are going to be in quotation marks. Your thesis statement, as I said earlier, comes at the end of your introduction. Your audience, you must assume, has already read your text. You must stay away from plot summary. Now, I've been getting some questions as to whether or not you can analyze other passages besides what's listed below. No, you can only analyze one of the passages that I have listed below. You can see that when you break it down to as small a parts as I have done in my example, you probably won't even get to the whole passage for this response. Now, you may use your knowledge of the story to help inform your interpretation, right? So just like I did here, right, I know that later on, it's going to describe, right, this town as the sky is gray, the beach is gray, the rotten smell. I know that's coming up, right? So I'm not going to interpret that here in this paragraph, but I am going to use it, right, to help me understand that something significant has happened, right, that has affected the whole village, right? So no, you can only interpret the passage that's given you, but you also can use your knowledge of what happens in your story to help inform your interpretation, okay? I hope that makes that clear. Stick to, therefore, one of the 2 passages. And again, my suggestion is to go to your interpretation first before you try to do your thesis statement, then do your thesis statement, right? Before you get too far, that will give you your roadmap. And then you can write your introduction and finally your conclusion, which is going to show why your interpretation of this passage should be relevant to us today, living today. I hope that this helps you understand how to do the assignment. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Some people have asked me, should we put the TIEIA in the paragraph? That's absolutely fine. I think it's a good idea, actually, if you do this, because then you yourself know where your topic sentence is. You've not left anything out. You've got it all in there. But you don't have to. I'm not requiring it, but I do think it's a good idea. I am requiring, though, as my final statement, that you must have a TIEIA paragraph in your response in order for me to grade your writing response. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Feel free to email me if you have any further questions. All right, have a great day.